I'm going to pass around a sign-in sheet. You don't have to fill the whole thing in, but if you do want more information from me or our agency, you can go ahead and put your email address at the very end. So again, you don't have to put your full name. You can maybe just put your first name and then your last name initial. Okay? Oh yeah, you don't have to fill all that in. Just the yeah. But again, if you want information or you want to get included in our newsletter, you can put your email address on there.
Okay, I have 10 o'clock, so we're going to get started. Remember, it's important to take notes because there will be an assignment related to this presentation. Shannon, thank you for being here. Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Shannon Hoshnick. I am a role grant coordinator and a prevention educator / victim advocate with Sexual Assault Services of Northwest New Mexico. My clans are Reed People, Salt People, Water Edge, and then also Bitterwater. So those are how I identify. I'm originally from Arizona, from Kanta and Denahutso area. I moved out here about maybe 17 years ago. I graduated from Farmington High. I also had gone as an instructor, history instructor, long ago. So I did attend here at San Juan College and then at New Mexico Highlands. I got my MSW from University of Denver out of Durango last year. So again, enjoy your journey, your education journey, and keep doing the hard work because it benefits very well. Our offices is located down by the hospital. We don't advertise for our offices, just for confidentiality and the safety of our clients. So again, the address is there, 622 West Maple. We're inside the family practice building across from the eye doctor in that building. So just on a side note, all of our services are free. All the services that we provide are free. We don't ever charge for our services. And we also serve McKinley County, San Juan County, and Rio Arriba, and also all the surrounding travel areas. And so when we talk about this topic, it can be very difficult. So when we do go out in the community, and especially in our schools, I'm a prevention educator, so I do go into Head Starts and daycares. So again, we have to be very careful on how we use our terminology when we're talking about rape, sexual assault. So just recently, we tried to include some other ways how we can provide our services and then also our education and our outreach. So the terms rape, sexual assault, gender neutral, also including acts of any indecent, unwanted sexual contact, and also as well as penetration. And assault clearly identifies the crime. And again, terms we use: victim, survivor, patient, client, offender, suspect, perpetrator. So again, we have to be very careful on how we use these terms. Then what is rape and what is sexual assault? A sexual act committed against your will or without permission. Again, these can be gestures, verbal looks, touching, grabbing, groping with or without clothing, unwanted advances, attempted rape, injuries, pain caused to the genital area, and a broader category more than rape. And I think there was a portion that was actually missing on the side there, or no, it isn't. Okay. Unwanted penetration of the body. And what's important about these body part names is that with my little kiddos, when I do prevention education with my kids, I go as young as 2 teaching prevention education. So that's really important to use those correct body part names, even with little kids. So even a form of a private body part, we also identify as mouth to little kiddos. Because sometimes they miss that. They think, oh, you know, why is my mouth a body part? But for little kids, a lot of percentage of the time, because their bodies are so small that perpetrators, they use that portion of their mouth. And again, we really try to identify. So when I'll talk about Care for Kids later, but that's one important thing when talking to little kids. And when I do talk and do presentations, some people, they say, okay, well, I don't have little kids. I'm not a parent. And then, you know, you could be an auntie, an uncle, a cousin, a sister, older sibling, a neighbor. There's always little kids around. So again, it's really important to understand why with little ones, it's important to use these correct body part names, because that's one of the things that we see with our little kids that we see in our office, our child cases, is that they use nicknames. So that's really important.
Shannon, do you think that has a lot to do with culture, and certain cultures just make up nicknames, or do you see that across the board?
We see it across the board. And once I go over our summary of services for last year, again, you'll see the comparison of which ethnicity is highest. So I'll go over that, but that is a good question. And just for me being in this work for the last 4 years, and me being Native American, I was it was a very touchy subject with me to talk about that with my own kids. But now since I've learned, and I've been an advocate, and I put myself out there, especially being out in the Native American community, it's so taboo that once I show my little baby dolls on some of my educational booths, some people tend to be like, oh, you know, I don't want to talk about that. Or even just having a banner on my booth saying sexual assault services, you'll see how a lot of people, they'll tend to avoid certain tables because of that reason. So, I mean, we kind of explored changing our name because of that. But then again, it's like, why should we have to change our agency name? Because to benefit, you know, it would benefit, but it still occurs. It still happens. So that's why we were really struggling with that, but we decided not to do that. So a lot of myths and facts. People believe, okay, rape is perpetrated by strangers. Do you guys think that's true? No. Who do you guys think that is more perpetrated by? Family members, neighbors, friends, acquaintances. We even moved away from saying date rape, because it's like saying, oh, okay, well, you gave that person permission. Why did you go up to their apartment or go home with them when they offered you to, oh, let's go have a drink at my house? You know, it's like, okay, well, you kind of, that kind of thing. It's like, okay, well, you know, I didn't agree to certain things. This person was a friend of mine, but that still didn't give them the right to violate them. Also, most rapes happen on the street. Of course, again, that's a really huge myth, because a lot of our cases is occurring by somebody that person knows. And we also go away from saying, you know, stranger danger, especially with the little ones, because that's very rare that it happens by a stranger. Again, rapists are mentally ill or sexually starved. Rapists come from any background, rich, poor, any socioeconomic status, any gender, educational. They could be a teacher, they could be a person that's well known in the community, a coach, just anybody. Any cultural background, religion. Victims provoke rape by the way they dress or behavior. It's really interesting how when we go and do safe dates in the schools and high schools and middle schools, that they say, oh, okay, well, she shouldn't have been wearing that. They asked for it. She shouldn't have been wearing that short of a skirt and heels. A woman shouldn't be at a bar by herself. But again, any person, they do not ask to be violated, sexually violated. But then if that was the case, why do we get child victims? Why do we get elderly victims? Again, these topics can be very difficult. So just on the side note, take care of yourself. We always remind our audience and our participants and people who we present to, take care of yourself. That's one thing that we also really try to, even ourselves, staff members, advocates, self-care. So the youngest victim I worked with was a 3-year-old little girl. And the oldest was 86. And that was a grandma. So again, it doesn't discriminate. And if that myth was true, why in those cases did those victims get perpetrated on? Sexual assault statistics. 1 out of every 6 American women have been the victim of attempted or completed rape in their lifetime. And this is nationwide. Native American was recently 1 in 3, now it's 1 in 2. And about 3% of American men, or 1 in 33, again, this is an old one, was a couple of years ago 1 in 20, now 1 in 6. And majority of our child survivors, the highest right now is between 12 and 17. One of our prevention programs that we doing here in San Juan County, which has been going very, very well just recently, last year, we've been in almost all the high schools in San Juan County. The only 2 schools that we've not been in was Rosinante and Charlie Brown out in Bloomfield. Other than that, from Shiprock, even all the way out to Dulce, down to Gallup, we've been in almost all the high schools. And so we try to provide that with the sexual education, sexual assault prevention education with the high school. And that's a part of their sexual health education portion. So we really work close with the physical ed and the health teachers and try to include us in those presentations. So we try to collaborate with them, and they allow us maybe at least 1 to 4 days max of time to be with their classes. So right now, last week we started, and the first school that they completed was Bloomfield. They're currently in a Farmington High School. They started today. Then next week we'll be at Kirtland Central, working with their health education classes.
Shannon, how many professionals do you have at your organization?
Right now we have 2 full-time prevention educators. I myself, I'm a half-time prevention educator. So I really go out to the reservation schools, residential dorms. I've been out to Dulce. I've completed their middle school and their high school students. I go out to Aztec dorm, and I complete their students. Last year was about 81 students that completed it. I went down to Fort Wingate and worked with their middle school and high school students. So a lot of the outskirt, more rural schools, I try to provide the prevention programs for them. It's just that it's harder for those schools because their schedules are so different that in the dorms it's easier. I tend to, for the time frame, I'll go out there maybe 6 to 10 time visits once a week in the evenings. maybe like on a Wednesday, I'll go out there about an hour and a half or 2 hours, and then do that every week until they get the full curriculum. And I also do that with Care for Kids. Depending on some schools, such as Hanagle out towards Bloomfield, they have a residential dorm. They go from first grade to seniors. So with those dorms, I try to combine both Care for Kids and Safe Dates.
And with all of the work that you're doing, that doesn't sound like enough staff.
No, actually it isn't. So for us, we don't really, we try to spread out as much as we can. And during the school time, it's really difficult for our prevention staff, is because like we're going like nonstop, constant. And if you can count all the high schools in San Juan County and prevention staff, so it's like the whole time we're just doing schools. I even go to Navajo Prep and work with their teen outreach program. So again, there's those two, but then we also have two Highland students that go with them. So right now one was attending with them last week. So once they kind of get the hang of how to do these and help prevent or do the prevention program, and then they'll kind of go along with one person. We never leave them by themselves. So they're always with somebody, but that kind of gives them that portion of their practicum. Again, more statistics. Less than a third of rapes involve the use of a weapon. And this is really important too, because every person is going to respond differently. Sometimes we get law enforcement, or sometimes we get other personnel from whatever jurisdiction that we're working with. They may tend to say, okay, well, why didn't they fight back? Why didn't they do this? Why didn't they do that? And I'm not surprised anymore on how people do respond and what they comment on sometimes. They're like, oh, well, I think she's lying, or I think he's not telling the truth, because they're not emotional. They're not, that flat affect of, if I got assaulted, I would be like traumatized and I'd burst in tears or something. That's their opinion of how every person responds to an assault. Again, just as an advocate, we're trained on how to assist and support that individual. Because just because they didn't react or are responding in a certain way doesn't mean that nothing happened. And again, for 3 out of 4 reported sexual assaults, the offender is not a stranger, somebody that they know. And sexual assault is a violent crime, least often reported to law enforcement. And there are a lot of reasons of why somebody's not going to report to law enforcement. Can you guys think of a few, maybe? Examples of why somebody wouldn't report? Fear, family members.
Drugged and don't know what happened.
Drugged and don't know what happened.
Don't want to be labeled.
They don't want to be labeled. There could be so many different reasons. Again, it could have happened in the workplace. Maybe there's intimidation. Maybe somebody's being threatened, especially with little kids. It could be a family member, somebody that's well known to their family. They can even be threatened, intimidated. That's something that I'll talk about too later, is they're being groomed. So those are some of the things to also think about, is like, okay, well, why didn't you report? We get walk-ins of survivors who maybe have gotten assaulted 10 years ago. And they come in for counseling. But we don't tell them, oh, well, why didn't you report? Did you report it? But we're not going to assist you unless you go and report. And we're like, no, we don't do that. We don't ever turn anybody away. But that's one thing that some do ask themselves, is like, okay, well, did you make a report? And we never force them to report, depending on the age. And I'll go through that too also. This is our 2016 summary of services. So if you could just go ahead and take a look at that for a second.
How many nurses do you have?
Right now, I think we have 11, but that is in different areas. So again, there's here in Farmington, there's in Shabbat, and then there's also down in Gallup. So I know we do have a turnover for nurses. So they go through a very, very extensive training to be a nurse, specifically to be a sexual assault nurse. So the total number of exams, 141. On a good note, that's the highest we've had since sexual assault services has been open, since 2003. And when I say on a good note, is that people are more aware that we're in the community. We're getting more reports. They know where to go. And again, if you look at the pediatric and the adolescent ages, very high, very, very high. Gender, females is 125, males 16. And again, that's the highest, especially, I mean, that's gonna include adolescent and pediatric males, but also there's a couple adult males in there. And again, that's just getting our services and our awareness out there in the community, letting them know that we don't discriminate. And we're very supportive. And we do have one male advocate, volunteer advocate on our advocate team. And then we also have one staff male advocate. So we try to accommodate and make survivors as comfortable as possible. So if there's a case where the female survivor doesn't want the male advocate on that case, they can always call on the female advocate and vice versa. There's a male survivor, they'll accommodate that because we want them as comfortable as possible. So the ethnicity, who's the highest in that category? Native Americans. And again, it's a lot of little ones, sibling groups even.
How often do you see that? You'll get a sibling group?
Yeah.
Numerous children.
Numerous children from the same family. And I know one case I had to go and shadow and help that advocate because there was a big family. So that family needed 2 advocates just to assist with the kids. Because sometimes the advocate, if the family needs the advocate to go into the same exam room with them, just to help assist, because little kids, they tend to be very hard to calm down. I know with the one little girl that I had, the mom had to actually lay down on the exam table with her, and the little girl had to lay on her to kind of, calm her down and help. And I was, there's a princess poster up on top on the ceiling, but I was also helping, I was painting the little girl's toenails and her fingernails just to help ease her. But there was one case that I was also into where the nurse can call that exam off. Because the child was so traumatized and couldn't calm down that the nurse was like, you know what, I'm not going to do this to this child. We're not going to do this. We're re-traumatizing this child. So sometimes they can make that call and stop that exam. Or even the parent, depending on the extent, they can end that. But we do get hotline calls as well. And majority of the time it'll be like, okay, well, this happened. And sometimes they just want counseling. They want a description of our services. So we'll let them know what our services are. And then if we do get a call through our hotline, we'll turn it over to the nurse. And then the nurse decides if that's going to actually be a case or not. And then they get in contact with the advocate. So there's always an advocate on call. There's always a nurse on call. Our hotline is never down, so it's open year-round, all hours. And I'm the advocate for the Dulce area and Crown Point. So when we ever get cases from those areas, I'm the one that's on call and I assist with those cases. Signs of sexual assault. For children, inappropriate sexual knowledge and inappropriate sexual behavior. And again, when I do care for kids, I have this little form here, which I hand out to maybe the staff or parents. Range of sexual behaviors in young children. It goes from normal to report needed. So it has all these identifications of what's normal behavior and what's not normal behavior, and when it is good to report. You guys know what mandatory reporting is? So we're a mandated reporter. So if we like, let's say we're out doing safe dates and someone comes to us and says, okay, well, you know, I was assaulted. I didn't know that was assault. So we're mandated to report depending on age. Like 12 and under, we have to make a report. So when we report, it's to the state central intake, New Mexico. And I think I'll have that number up on the last screen. But we make that report. And depending too, maybe even to law enforcement.
This is 12 and under, you said?
12 and under, and again, depending, because when we're doing with safe dates, we'll get teenagers say, oh, my friend, you know, they experienced this. They're not coming out and saying, well, you know, this happened to me. What happens if? Okay, what about this situation? And again, just depending. But then also, if it's a case to where, you know, we sit down with the teacher, or maybe we report to the counselor, we're all there as a team. And that's why when we do safe dates, we don't want anybody by themselves, because we do get disclosures. And again, we do Sky, and sometimes even with the youth, they'll come out and they'll say, yes, I'll report. I want to report. I didn't know that was sexual assault. I didn't know what was going on was wrong. And I didn't know I had options to do this, this, and this. And so that way we are also there to provide that support.
Do you find that teenagers will tell you before their own parents?
Yes. Yes, they will. So again, when I do care for kids, body parts, this is wrong, this shouldn't be happening. Then also we moved away from saying good touch and bad touch. We say safe and unsafe touch. Because on the normal category here, touching or rubbing one's own genitals. Kids are going to be curious, right? Maybe they may masturbate. And that's, again, on their own. They're curious, you know, they're kind of thinking, okay, you know, what's this and what's that? And then also mutual exploration, playing doctor. We do sometimes have those phone calls. You know, I walked in with my daughter and maybe their cousin doing this, and it's like, oh, okay, you know. And that's where, instead of shaming them and instantly saying, don't do that, you're not supposed to do that, ask them, what were you doing? Because that way, if you're talking to them, they're being more descriptive of, oh yeah, this is why. And if they're curious, instead of shaming them and making them feel bad, then it's like, oh, okay, I need to talk to my little ones more about this. Because at that age, if they have an adult, someone that they trust is telling them this behavior is good and this behavior is bad, and then it's like, oh, for some other reason, maybe they do get approached, or they see somebody else approaching a child, like maybe at school or a cousin or something, they can say, my mom, my uncle, or so-and-so told me that's bad. You shouldn't be doing that to them. And little kids, they are very, very intuitive. They have that intuition of, ooh, this person's creepy. You know, ooh, I don't like them. And that's why we really, really tell little kids, if you think something is bad and something makes you feel icky, say something, tell somebody. And that's why when I use my little babies, the very first one that we do is called body parts. So these little babies I use with my Care for Kids. And again, Care for Kids has 6 sessions and they're 30 minutes long. and I go from 2 all the way to 8. But sometimes with middle school kids, some middle school kids, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, they don't even know the correct body part names. So I'll take those safe date kids and not let them do safe dates, and I'll let them do care for kids instead. Because you think, okay, well, why take middle school out of safe dates and then teach them care for kids? But it's even more intimidating and overwhelming for them because they've not even been able to learn this information first. So again, of course, this little baby's a little boy, and I go through all the body parts from head all the way down to toes. And do you think the little kids are the ones that are more embarrassed in these sessions? Who do you think is more embarrassed?
Yeah.
The adults are. So I'm like, what is this body part? And they'll giggle and they'll laugh. But the little kids are like throwing out nicknames already. Wee wee, my pee pee, my wiener, and all the, you can even, there's like all these different names that I didn't even know. We're like, whoa, what is that? But the adults are the ones that are like, oh my God, don't say it. And I'm like, it's a body part. What is wrong with that? But you notice too, when infants, when you're singing the head to toe body song, which names are left out? Privates. Penis, butt, anus, vagina. Those parts are not included. Even when they're potty training. Dads can potty train. I'm sure they're potty training their daughters. Moms are potty training little boys. But to also include, this is your penis, this is your vagina, and nobody touches you there. And it's also important to have them bathe themselves, clean themselves, wipe themselves. And also for care for kids, we tell them nobody should ever be going to the bathroom with you at a certain age. If somebody's asking to go into the bathroom with you to make sure you're cleaning yourself right, no. That's your responsibility. And that's also something we teach with Care for Kids, is independence and responsibilities. At a certain age, they should be able to do certain things on their own. And we do get some families and some dads and moms say, okay, well, I'm still taking showers with my daughter, and she's 5 and 6. And we're like, we're not going to say, oh, you need to stop that. But then after they get this curriculum, they're like, oh, okay, now I see why. We don't want to tell them it's inappropriate, but also to let them know that their child needs to understand some things. There's some boundaries there, healthy boundaries.
Well, you can tell me what's inappropriate. So what age should parents be cutting that off? In your professional opinion, the showering together? Should that ever happen in your experience and professional opinion?
I would say once after they're potty trained and once they're starting to learn how to take care of themselves safely. Again, depending on certain situations, because we, just like for maybe developmentally challenged kids, they're gonna have to be bathed and showered, just situations like that. But on another part, that's one of the things where if parents are attending Care for Kids with their children, we tell them there's a certain age you need to, introduce healthy boundaries. Because I also say, well, if your child's going to have a sleepover at somebody else's house, and they say, oh, well, we do this at our house, and then they do something completely different there, it's kind of hard to, get those mixed up.
And for your Care for Kids, how do parents know about this program? So do all the child care, the daycare centers, do they know that this program is available? As a parent, how do you even know that this is available?
Again, we do a lot of outreach and education, but we get a lot of resistance here, especially in Farmington. Once we try to say, okay, well, we have this curriculum, it's nationally known, it's evidence-based, and this is one of the only prevention program that is evidence-based for this young of an age. But when we do present it, they rarely ask us to come back. There's only a few daycares here in Farmington that allow us to do it. And the most places that I've had a lot of success with is the BIE schools. Again, out in the Nahanzad, the dorm out there, the K through 1, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. They'll let me go out there and do care for kids with them.
How can daycare operators be resistant to wanting the children? What reasons are you getting for this?
Most of the daycares, if their parents, they're paying for that service. And their parents are like, okay, well, I don't want my child attending that. And parents, they will pull their kids out. So if we offer that service and they have half of the kids attending and half the other kids not wanting to attend.
And do you think it's because the parents, I wouldn't jump to the conclusion that it's because the parents are doing something wrong, they don't want it brought to the light. Do you think it's just ignorance? Not understanding?
Not understanding, and then also thinking, getting the wrong idea of what we're presenting to their child. Again, just like with safe dates. Oh, you're teaching our children about having sex and prevention of pregnancy and all these different things, but then it's like, okay, if you can think of just one class that we hit, if every high school, there's actually 1 to 5 kids that are saying, wow, I didn't know that was assault. Wow, this is currently happening to me. Oh, wow, that happened to me when I was a child. And they didn't think, okay, I'm struggling with all these things right now, but now I know why. And they can get help for themselves, or they can come to us and say, I want counseling. So that's one of the good things about that too. But Care for Kids is out there, and we do really try to include that. These are a couple of books that I have that I take out to my Navajo schools because it's in English and in Navajo. It's a coloring book. It's a story in Navajo about how coyote and snake should be protecting each other and protecting the little kids. So I'll pass these around. I only have a few of these left, so if you want a copy, you can go ahead and take a look at that. So when I do Care for Kids in the daycares, or maybe like a Navajo Head Start, I'll include that copy with them. Because the kids can take that home and they can color that with their parents. So, and it's kind of cool to where it's also both in Navajo and in English. Common reactions after experiencing sexual violence. Withdrawal, depression, problem sleeping, psychosomatic symptoms, school problems, hygiene, anxiety, guilt. So again, everybody's going to respond different. They're not going to all have the same response. And that's again another reason why we're trying to start at a young age doing that prevention. Because once we start prevention with Care for Kids at that age, there's more work on prevention than intervention as they get into adulthood. And again, with the middle schools. Once they start Care for Kids, and we do that consistently, they get into middle school, they're getting a version of safe dates at an early age, but then we're going back to them again, and they're seeing us in high school. So it's being consistent. But then it's not only our work that needs to be done, it's also at home. And so that's why we try to bring to the attention with the parents, this is the work that we're doing, but we need you to continue at home as well. Again, there's different responses. They may laugh, they may cry, they may be upset, they can disassociate, seem out of it, have a flat affect. They don't even have to show any emotion, or they can be embarrassed or nervous. They can definitely blame themselves. So again, not every survivor is going to have the same response. And they can even be resistant to us. They may be hesitant. Oh, they come to our office and they say, okay, well, now I don't want to do this. I changed my mind. Again, it really depends on how they want to go about it. But there's a time frame where we have to be very careful on when we can offer certain services. During an assault, intellectual or emotional response, fight, flight, freeze, some will fight back. Some will run, but some will freeze. And especially during the sexual assault nurse exam, sometimes, but not all the time, law enforcement, depending on what jurisdiction, will say, oh, well, maybe they wanted it to happen. There's no injuries. They didn't fight back. Why didn't you run? Why didn't you scream? Why didn't you do something? So that's why we really try to include law enforcement training as well, because we have first responders who are responding inappropriately to a victim. And then once they have that first responder responding to them inappropriately or negatively saying, oh, well, you didn't fight back, maybe it didn't happen, oh, we don't have injuries, you shouldn't report. So that's why, again, we try to provide training.
Do you see that more with certain agencies in particular?
No, not really. Again, I think with tribal, it's not a bad thing to say that they're doing it. It's just that, again, with the training and their turnover is so high that they have new officers coming in and then some are leaving. So it's really hard to do that. But that's one of the things that we're trying to improve on, is that response. I mean, we even have EMTs sometimes going to a situation, an incident, and they're like, oh, okay, what happened? And, oh, she's intoxicated or he's intoxicated. So again, trying to be more supportive and understanding, empathic, because what we get is survivors walking in and saying, oh, well, I tried to report at this police department and they didn't really want to help. So that's one thing too that we don't want to happen, is having them having to come. I mean, it's good that they're advocating for themselves and they're walking in as a survivor, but we also want all the teams in the area to be collaborating together. And then immediate following an assault, primary instinct is safety. And again, can come in different forms. And we provide, we also have counseling, we have the advocate, there's also the SANE. And then if they want to come to our office and do a report there, they can do that. We can always call law enforcement and they can come and do the report there. Reasons responses may vary. Again, we talked about that. Reasons of why somebody will not report, the relationship to the perpetrator, their coping mechanisms, alcohol or drug involvement, support, lack of support, cultural influence, and then past trauma. So again, any one of these, and of course they're not all up there, but there's also a lot of reasons why someone's not going to report. Confidentiality, privacy, personal expectations, past expectations or experiences. Again, the relationship to the perpetrator, lack of knowledge about laws, the desire to get on with life, outside influences, discouraging, and that's probably one of the biggest things, especially with little ones, or maybe youth, or maybe they let somebody else close to them know, this happened to me, what should I do? Intimidation, threatening, and it's really hard for our rural communities, because there's family plots out there, family lands, to where maybe this happened inside of somebody's home, and then people are living around them. So it's like, this is my home, so and so assaulted me, but they live right next door. So it's hard for them to do that. It's like, okay, if I report, all these people in my family are going to be against me. Or maybe fear of other survivors, other victims coming forward as well. Reasons a person may report: sense of justice, strong system of support, they're familiar with the legal system, they're needing to regain a sense of control, empowerment, and wanting to keep it happening from somebody else or happening to somebody else. After effects of sexual assault. More likely to have a sexually transmitted infection. Again, some of these are nationally over 32,000 pregnancies or result from rape, gynecological and pregnancy complications, other physical complications. Also, this can also include other hardships and difficulties, challenges, obstacles in their life. Depression, suicide, alienation, PTSD, alcohol, substance abuse, other unhealthy behaviors. And for New Mexico, these are some of the sexual abuse and sexual exploitation of a minor is illegal. And again, if you just want to read that really quick. Again, on the very bottom, the duty to report, mandatory reporting, child abuse and child sexual abuse laws. If you go into New Mexico Coalition of Sexual Assault, it has all the statutes and laws in there. Then there's also one by Betty Caponera. She just did a recent one, I think it was from December 2016. And it breaks it down to all communities in New Mexico.
Do you work with other providers around the state?
Yes, we do. We work with, there's I think 6 other rape crisis centers. So we try to collaborate with them. We also work really close with the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Native Women. So we try to keep updated on all these.
Well, my
laws and
question was,
statutes.
so we had Sarah Holiday came a couple of weeks ago and reminded us about how high San Juan County is in regard to domestic violence. We always hear it about DWI. In relation to the state, where is San Juan County with sexual assault? High, low?
It's pretty high. It's pretty high. It's one of, I don't want to say the highest, but we're up there, especially with the child sexual abuse. And we will collaborate with Sarah to where if they need our assistance, we can help assist them. And we also get referrals from her. And those are one of the things to where in domestic violence cases, we do have some victims feel like, I'm married to this person and they did this to me and I didn't think it was illegal for them to do that and it was a crime, but it is. So we do get referrals. And again, this goes towards the mandatory reporting. Any child 12 years of age and younger, regardless of the relationship of the perpetrator. And then any youth 17 years age and younger, depending on if this person is in a position of authority. This gets really difficult and challenging when we're in safe dates talking about this, because some kids, they're like, oh, okay, well, I'm 14 and my boyfriend's like 19. Or we get parents who come in and say, okay, well, she's involved with a person who's so much older than her, and there's a portion to where somebody can consent to any sexual activity. Again, depending on the situation, that's why when I say this portion here can kind of be challenging, is 13-year-old can receive or decline, and again, portion to the age of consent. If we have a 13-year-old come to our office and say, okay, I want these services, we can't turn them away and say no. We can provide counseling to them. We don't have to notify their parents. And again, that's really important too with safe dates, because oh, well, I don't want to tell my parents that this happened. But they say, oh, I want to receive services, or this happened to me, because we would want that individual, that youth to say, okay, well, let's say we did safe dates and then a week later something happens, maybe not to them, but to somebody else. And they say, okay, well, I know of this place, let's get you some help. I'll come with you. But then they're afraid to tell their parents. Depending on the severity of the case, the situation, we will keep that confidentiality with that youth.
But then how does that fall in with the mandatory reporting with the police?
Again, 12 and under is mandatory reporting. But then if it's higher than that, we don't want that youth to get scared away of, you know, I don't want to report because I'm going to have to tell my parents, officers are going to be called in that situation. But again, depending on the situation and the circumstances of that incident, maybe they don't have to. But we can tell them, you can report if you choose to. We also, when they do a sexual assault nurse exam, they don't have to do the complete physical exam. They can provide sexual transmitted infection medication. Because if they do get assaulted and an incident occurred and they just want to come in and receive that medication, and that's all they want, and then we can end it there for them. Because they can get that.
With the current spikes of STDs with the local area, have you guys seen more of it? Like
We actually don't test. Yeah, we just provide the medication. We don't have I mean, we can't say, oh, well, you got chlamydia from this incident. We can't do tests like that. We can just say, okay, we're going to provide you some medication to prevent it. But you can go to public health, or you can go to your primary physician and get tested or treated. Time frame for exams. For kids, it's really important because for 12 and under, we need to have this exam done within 3 days. Little kiddos' bodies, they heal very, very fast. And this portion, it's just gathering of evidence, maybe taking pictures. If there's other injuries that needs to be attended to, we will send them to the emergency room prior to coming to us, because we want those needs met first. For adults, it's 5 days from within the time that it happened. There should be no bathing, changing clothing, eating, brushing teeth. If they do change their clothes, we ask them if you can bring clothes with you, or again, maybe even with little kids, bring diapers. And there's also the delayed, anytime after those time frames, the 3 days or the 5 days, there's the delayed exam. Again, this might not include the physical exam. There could just be, they can take pictures, or they can just do documentation. We work really close with Child Haven. Sometimes with little kids, they'll go to Child Haven first, do a forensic interview. And from that forensic interview, if they get any information of the same not having to be done, or they want a same done. So again, there's precautions that we take. We don't just go in there and say, oh, we're going to do the same exam. We want all the information, because we don't want to have the same exam done if nothing happened. Because we don't want to put that individual into that those circumstances if we don't have to. There's usually a criminal investigator, if it's Navajo Nation, there during that forensic interview, because they can also say, okay, well, we don't need a same exam because of the information that was provided. Again, we have rape crisis advocates. We're almost done with our fall training. We started beginning of the month, and I believe we have maybe 6 volunteer advocates right now. So that should bump us up to having at least 12 advocates, minus staff advocates. So it's really important for us to have those advocates, because our area is so big. Again, we were covering 3 counties. We also have a same room down in Shiprock, at the IHS in Shiprock. So if we have someone coming to their hospital needing a same exam, we can provide services there. and their sexual assault nurse, one sexual assault nurses examiner that lives in Shiprock. Then we also have advocates from that community that can go to the hospital there if they need to, instead of having them come all the way out here. So again, just depending on the situation, because there's going to be cases, survivors who say, I don't want to go to Shiprock. I want to come to Farmington. Because you know how close-knit the community is, confidentiality, maybe they know somebody that works there and they don't want to run into anybody. So again, we try to accommodate and make them as comfortable as possible. Again, all our services are free. If there's a service that they want that we can't provide, we try to connect them to the community. I have some brochures up here and also our brochure, and I have my card up here if you need any of that. I know we have some questions, but I'll try to cover some really quick here. What time is your class?
11:15.
Oh, okay.
You're fine.
How often do you think sexual assault cases are dismissed because of mishandling of sexual assault evidence? So just depending on the legal system and if that system or that case is actually being reported and the consistency of that case, and then that depends. I don't want to say that it's being mishandled. Our evidence, especially with our sexual assault exam kits, our state kits, they go to a certain area, to a certain testing facility. So if you get a chance, I really encourage you to watch I Am Evidence. That's a new documentary that was, I think, released last year sometime, and that talks about the backlog of kits. And depending on the case, again, just rewording the mishandling, very rarely does evidence get mishandled. And that's why we try to do a lot of this awareness and outreach to the community and do presentations as to what needs to be collected after it's been reported. Again, how should it be collected, or of course our same nurse examiners are trained, but when we do presentations, that's where we tell our audience, this is collected and this is the reason why. And they say, okay, well, maybe they bathed or maybe they washed their clothes, and we're like, that's fine, still bring it. So that's one of the things. How do you recover from working with these very difficult cases? Self-care. Even after we have our cases, we provide debriefing for our advocates. Because I think I worked there a year and a half prior to becoming an advocate. It wasn't something that I was forced to do, but I thought, you know, okay, well, I feel like I'm comfortable enough, and I feel comfortable enough to become an advocate. But even that very first one was that 3-year-old little girl. And I thought, oh man, I made a big mistake. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this. But again, the debriefing, self-care, kind of balancing out that, you know, your mental health, taking care of yourself. Because I have 3 little ones. I have a 9, a 13, and a 16-year-old. And my 9-year-old at 5 in kindergarten throwing around the word penis to everybody was, because that was when I was teaching them. I went to his classroom and taught Carefree Kids there in his kindergarten class. So he's comfortable with saying it now, but even with safe dates with my daughter, there was one situation to where we go through all different topics in safe dates. We'll talk about social media, safety, about anything. Because healthy relationships, safe dates is about healthy relationships, boundaries, prevention of domestic violence, prevention of sexual assault. But they know us very well now in the high schools. I mean, even my daughter's friends will know us. Wow, we saw your mom. Is she doing safe dates? And we'll be at high school. I'm like, yeah. But one incident that she had with a friend of hers is, I'm very close with my daughter, and she can come to me for anything. But she had a friend of hers. There was an older female person texting her. They met on Facebook. And her friend was trying to tell her, let's go meet this person at Brookside Park. She's gonna take us to the mall. We're gonna go watch a movie. I think this person's really cool, but I don't want to go by myself. Can you come with me? And my daughter showed me these text messages from this person that was texting her friend, and my daughter was telling this person, "Who are you? You need to stop texting my friend." That's kind of creepy. Why would an older woman want to take out this younger girl?
It might not have been a woman. No.
So she gave me that number, and I called this person, blocked me immediately. It was an older man from out of state. Because I turned it over to, of course we're connected and we collaborate a lot with law enforcement, turn it over to Sheriff's Department. And that's what it turned out to be. Completely freaked them out, but they learned their lesson. And so now with that close relationship, that's one thing that I encourage with parents. Talk about anything and everything with your kids. And it shouldn't matter if you feel uncomfortable, but they know. Be honest and straightforward and blunt with them. Because they don't know what is all out there, especially on social media. And that's one of the biggest things, is to where you see a lot of things going on, and to where it's like, I didn't know about it. And I think that's one of the biggest things where a lot of the human trafficking on our reservations is, it's unfortunate, but it happens. Is it difficult to work with children who have been sexually assaulted? And do you have to handle cases involving children differently than working with adults? I think we covered some of that in the presentation, but it is always difficult working with little kids. Again, we work with infants all the way up to elderly. But we do get those cases, and we do get a lot of cases. And that's why we really try to focus a lot on the care for kids. Even though we get resistance from the community, to where you would think daycares and Head Starts and elementary schools and these parents, wouldn't they want those programs in their schools? But a lot, we don't say, come to them. We're thinking, oh, come to us, but we're not getting that response. They're like, oh no, we'll think about it, but then we never hear back. But when you think that they'll be asking us to come, though, when it happens, now we want it. If a child has been sexually abused, how can adults help them recover so that their terrible experience isn't an excuse for bad behavior? Again, prevention. If it does happen, what services can we provide to help themselves and also their family? Counseling. At our agency, we don't provide counseling for 13 and under, but Child Haven does a really good job with that. They have therapists over there that can help, and there's also some with San Juan Behavioral Health. They have child therapists there too that can help with therapy. But that's one of the biggest things. Also, not just for the child, but for the family to get counseling, maybe even as a family, because we had a therapist that worked with teens, but she also encouraged the family to come do therapy sessions with their teen, and that really helped. And what age range are most victims of sexual assault? What did we see on that summary of services? And that's all minor, right? 12 and under was one of the highest. But then again, some of the youth was also included in that statistic. And that's why we really want to do safe dates in the middle school and high schools. And sometimes with safe dates, we'll even go as young as 6th grade, just depending. Because there's definitely fitness educators that know more than maybe some middle schoolers. In our county, are there more child molestations or more forcible rapes among adults? If you go back to Betty Caponera's report on sexual assault here in New Mexico, it'll break that down, San Juan County. And it'll go all the way to hospital visits, it'll go into law enforcement, and it'll break that down all the way to FPD, to San Juan County Sheriff. So I think that's one of the best resources to go to. Betty Caponera's sexual assault report, sexual violence report for New Mexico. And the most recent one was December of 2016. What is the most common type of sexual assault in San Juan County. Again, acquaintance. When I say acquaintance, that could be somebody that is known to that person, maybe a relative, maybe even family. Very rarely do we get stranger cases. How many sexual assault cases does the agency receive each month? Between 10 and 12. I know last year we had a month that we had 24. And sometimes we used to think that there was a higher rate during the time of year, but now once we did a little survey on that, there wasn't. So it was completely, there's not like, oh, during prom or during the summer or during fair time, you know, it doesn't happen that way. So it really balanced out the whole year. But that's one of the things too, is that during the fair, it's hard because if we have, let's say, Northern Navajo Fair is coming up. Let's say we have an incident that happens in Shiprock. So we have to really build up our collaboration efforts in Shiprock, because if we're going to have somebody go to the IHS in Shiprock and it happened on the other side of town and we need advocates to come in and the nurse, it's a good thing that we have advocates and a nurse from that area where they can respond. But we also have to collaborate with the law enforcement to get that individual to the hospital, because we know how hard it is just to get from one side of Shiprock across the bridge during prayer time. It could take like 4 or 5 hours. So again, we try to collaborate with that. Let's see. Statistically speaking, does one race suffer sexual assault more than the other? For SAS, what our summary services, what was that? Native Americans. Do you find that sexual assault is underreported by one race as compared to another? Again, that's going to, Native American is going to be an example of that, because depending on the area of where the incident happened, and then also the training of law enforcement or the training of first responders. And again, depending on how the family dynamics are going to be, that can be one determinant of why that's not going to be reported or why it's going to be reported. And also the education. If they don't feel like that was something that was wrong or something that's been going on in the family for a while and nobody's going to address it, again, that's another reason why it could be underreported in those areas. Domestic violence victims generally do not report the first several assaults. Is sexual assault similar? It could be, again, depending on the situation. Let's say we do have cases where an older victim will come forward because somebody who's younger in their family had reported. So maybe even that situation that could happen. Older siblings could also be offending on younger siblings.
I have a question real fast. Do you find that, do the victims report themselves, or do like someone close to them usually report them?
Both?
Both.
Yeah. Let's say, I mean, sometimes we even get doctors making a report to us, telling the family, oh, I seen this, I discovered this, you know, what is this? We need to send you over to SAS. And sometimes it can be nothing. Or we can get grandparents who are getting custody of their grandkids, and all of a sudden they see some inappropriate behavior that they shouldn't be knowing. So again, that's why those are red flags. So be aware of red flags, especially with little ones. Any sexual inappropriate behavior, and they're knowledgeable about some things that they shouldn't know at that age, and you think, you know, what's going on, but not to instantly be like, oh, you know, that child's been sexually assaulted. Gather facts, information. Maybe even ask questions. I mean, that's what we're trained to do, is ask questions. You know, where did you see that? Who told you that? Then they're like, oh, well, this and this and this. And you're like, oh, okay. And also be careful on what they're watching and what they're listening to. And I know that's kind of hard to say with everything you see on TV and what you listen to the news. I mean, you can turn the radio on and you can hear like, oh my God, what was that? Or even like at the mall or just anything. Be careful on how we do that. And then also with kids, let them be in control of their body. They're responsible for their own body. What I tell parents is we're traumatizing our kids. I mean, you can go to the mall during Easter and Christmas time and you're seeing kids crying and bawling, sitting on this huge Easter bunny's lap, and they're, you know, the parents are the ones that are like, I want this picture, take this picture, and their child sitting there in a stranger's lap, freaking out, but they're like, oh, it's so cute. You sit there and just take a picture, stop crying. And you're like, I don't want to. So it's like, even then, it's the parents, the adults, or even like with Santa Claus. You're like, oh, it's Santa Claus, but to the kid, it's like, oh my God, this weird, creepy guy in a fake beard and this big red suit, and my parents forcing me to sit on his lap and take a picture. So it's like, let them be in control of their body. And me, even from a cultural perspective, my family now, they're very kind of like hesitant with me, because for me, when I was being raised, it's like, you respect your elders. You shake their hand, you give them a hug. But again, Native Americans, the highest. Our kids are not being given that responsibility of, it's my body, I'm gonna hug who I want, I'm gonna shake whoever's hand that I want. If I'm gonna say no, take no for an answer. Because that's what we're telling our youth and our adults, no means no. And so my family, they used to get offended. Oh, your kids are so disrespectful and they don't shake their Nolly's hand and grandma, and I'm like, this is the reason why. They're like, oh, okay. Not to say that it happened, but I'm telling them, you know, I want my kids to understand that if somebody's gonna make them feel creepy, or they don't wanna shake somebody's hand or give them a hug, it's their choice. And I'm not saying you're the bad person, but you're the adult. You handle it in this way. I mean, even my 9-year-old, when he was in elementary school, I used to be able to hug him and give him a kiss before he got out of the vehicle to go to class. But now he's like, oh, Mom, don't do that. Don't do that. And I'm like, okay, well, my 9-year-old's growing up. And it's not on me, it's just him. And I tell them that too. You know, because they'll be mad and upset some days, but it shouldn't be us that get offended, right? It's them. They're having a bad day, because us as adults, we have bad days. And that's how I am too sometimes. You know, I shake hands with people, but if they don't want to shake hands, you know, I'm not going to be like, you know, what's wrong with that person that they don't want to shake my hand? So again, just giving that that space and that boundary, because kids do watch us. They watch us very closely. And I think especially with Care for Kids, when I do Care for Kids, they don't hold anything back either. They don't have no filters. And sometimes I'll have parents in the background listening in, watching, because they're learning at the same time. And some kids will be like, oh, well, I saw mommy and daddy in the shower. And you're like, oh my God. And they're like, okay, well, see, kids watch and see everything. That's why you should, you know, if you're going to be intimate, close the door. Be careful in where you do it, because they're thinking, oh my God, I didn't know where they learned that from. And you're like, what's happening in the home, they're going to learn from. And that's where some of those behaviors are coming from. And if you're ashamed of it, now that they know, you need to sit down with your child and explain. Because even at a young age, they're learning a lot. So those are some other things too. Those under the age of 18 who are adjudicated of sexual assault acts do not have to register as sex offenders in New Mexico. Do you think they should have to register? They don't have to. Again, they're juveniles, and they get, I don't want to say charged, but those criminal offenses are different. So again, depending on the severity of some criminal offenses. Again, if you look in Betty Kapnera's report, that'll share that in there. And there's some laws that she shares too in there. Any last questions? I guess I can answer some of these. I did answer some individually, but I can send this back to you.
Okay, that'd be fine.
I know it's kind of hard to go through this pretty quickly, but there's some brochures up here and cards up here if you have questions. You know, I'm welcome to answer.
Thanks, Shannon.
You're welcome.